Hi everyone and welcome to this course on object-oriented programming in Python. Python is by far the most popular language used today, and in this course we'll learn about OOP in Python. So let's begin. Basically, object-oriented programming is not limited to any specific programming language. We apply the concept of OOP with any programming language, but for the purpose of this course, we'll just focus on Python. Alright, so first things first, what is OOP? So, what is object-oriented programming? Object-oriented programming is the way of doing programming in a better way, in a more efficient way, in a more intelligent and structured way. Okay, so said differently, we can say that OOP allows you to do any type of work that normal programming cannot do, like that normal programming methods cannot do, so you can do it with OOP. So, not only that OOP is a much better way of programming, but it also allows you to do some additional stuff which are much more complicated to do in normal programming. Alright, so so as I said, it's just a way of doing things in an efficient and organized way in which we put the relevant functions of the app in a bunch of blocks. So blocks, in other words, we call them classes. We place objects into the classes. So in this way, what's the main purpose of object-oriented programming? If we do the following, like if we place objects in the classes and if OOP is organized in a bunch of blocks. So how does this improve our work? It basically improves the style of your code to build efficient and meaningful code. So it's more organized, it's more efficient, and that's pretty much it. Like when it comes to OOP, it's way more organized and meaningful, and you can directly spot something specific that you're looking for example. Alright, so the next question before us is why do we use it? Like, why do we use OOP? Alright, so as I said earlier, to use OOP, you don't really need like a specific programming language to adopt the OOP concept and the OOP way of doing things. You are free to use it with any programming language. You can use it with the programming language of your choice. You can use it with Python, with Java, or you can use it with any other programming language of your choice. So yeah, you can also use OOP with C# and many other programming languages. So it's really up to you. And if we use OOP, it's not because of the programming language. We use OOP because of what it allows us to do, and because of its power, and because of its organization, and because of the efficiency. That's why we use OOP. It's not because of the programming language. It's just a concept of programming. Alright, so the next question before us is why should it be used? Okay, so it should be used because when you are building a huge application, then it will have a lot of functions, and a lot of functions are relevant or similar to each other. So let's suppose you are making a calculator. So how many functions do we need to have in the calculator? There will be a function of addition, for example. There will be a function of subtraction. There will be a function of multiplication. There will be a function of division. There will be a function for the decimal, and there may also be a function for the square root, and there will also be a function of how to find the power of a number. So these functions are all relevant functions. And okay, so now what could be better for these functions is that we build a small house for them, like for those functions, where all of them are placed, and that house is the blocks. So this house that we are building to store these functions, you can see it as the blocks that we call classes. That's how we would name it in a meaningful way, or to better say it in a programming sense, we would call the blocks, like the classes. Alright, so in other words, we call them classes, And yeah, so it allows us to organize our building process. So if we're building the calculator, we need to have so many different functions, and to store them and to organize them, we need to use what we call classes. It's like those huge blocks of storage where we are storing these functions. Okay, so the next question before us is, what will happen if you don't use OOP? So what will happen if you do not use OOP? Basically, nothing much will happen if you don't use OOP in your code. But by writing your code using OOP, the redundancy of your code will be controlled. That means that the duplication in your code will be controlled if you do use OOP. However, if you don't use OOP, your code will run perfectly and at the same level as others, but there will be no cleanness in your code. So your data will not be as clean and as efficient as like when you build your code with OOP. When it's built with OOP, it will be much more clean and much more efficient. All right, so so there will be a lot of redundancy, and there will be a lot of duplication and repetitions in your code if you don't use OOP. Therefore, if we do use OOP, we will be free from the redundancies and our code will be like much cleaner. Okay, the next question that we have in front of us. So what class? All right, so a class is a place where all our functions are placed and where all our methods are placed, and that class will create an object, meaning that it will create an instance. So what is a class in short? It's a blueprint which then can be used as multiple instances for an app. For example, you can make a list by typing list, then brackets or curly brackets, and you write any digit or word with the English alphabetical words, and then you make it equal to any variable. So it will become your object, or will become an object of that class, or an instance of that class. So in the next lectures, we'll see them in more details. We'll see them like practically and implement them by using Python. But for now, just understand that there is a set of methods inside the class that we can use in our own way. Okay, so the next question is, what is an object and what are the methods? Like, what do we really mean by objects and methods in OOP? So as I said earlier, when you create an instance of a class, then that variable which you created was called an object. And for the method, it's like when you use the functions within your class. In other words, we call them methods. Like when you use functions within your class, we call them methods, so that they are referred to as methods. Alright, so the next question that will come to your mind is probably related to this question. What is the difference between methods and functions? So what factors differentiate methods and functions from each other? Okay, so as you can see, when you use the function in the simplest way, then that's what we call a function. Like when you use a function in the simplest way possible, then you can call it a function. However, when you use those same functions inside your class, like in your class, it has a different name, and that name is method. So you can call them methods. Okay, so let's conclude this lesson and keep in mind that when we use functions in our class, then we call them methods. So, alright, so that's pretty much it for this lecture. We covered the basic introduction about OOP. In the next lecture, we'll see and implement all these concepts one by one. But for now, like, what's important is that you understood what classes are, what objects and methods are, and how we can use them. Of course, at a later stage, we'll discover and learn about more advanced topics, such as the concept of constructor and polymorphism. But for now, that's pretty much it. So we'll leave it at this stage and see you in the next lecture. Alright, so let's move on.